Here I'm Hopkins. I'd like to present regarding the art of controlling BIM. Okay, let me go to the next slide. Okay, let me give some background about me. I've been contributing in the BIM field in the architecture line, where different specialties, where different specialists in documenting, in designing, in incepting a design towards a workflow, and how BIM can actually transform the whole process into a better and smoother way. So imagine yourself on a tightrope of progress, where a transition period in these 6 years of my experience, where it goes from a very 2D process into a 3D process, and it combines all the BIM workflows that you guys know, where it comes on from digital twinning to design inception, all the way to the construction stage, and how BIM can actually help you in the process. So there are many challenges ahead when we are implementing BIM in the office. Of course, on the high level, there's many guides to push BIM implementation on the high level. However, on the lower level, where we have to implement BIM, gathering collaboration from the existing specialist and implementing the BIM process from scratch. However, this act of balancing is very important, as if you walk through a tightrope, when you lose a balance, you lose control all over the implementation process. So as a challenge of a BIM implementer, what is important is how can you balance a BIM implementing, however, you do not interrupt the ongoing process, but at the same time improving it. So this is how I view BIM implementation in a nutshell. You have a bunch of current practice where you have to document a design and you incept a design. And then now you have raw BIM processes such as BIM workflows and you have raw BIM workflows, let's say design automation, that are all raw. That are in this industry, it's all about the technology moving forward. However, too much of BIM implementation will cause the current practice to lose balance and reject BIM. So as a BIM implementer, I think the best way to work forward is to work with the team implementing to improve the current practice. When you manage to merge the BIM process to current practice, it will not create redundant work, thus forming a refined BIM workflow specific to the firm that you're working from. Of course, every different firm or every different country has different ways of implementing BIM. It all goes back to what you want to achieve with BIM. So let's say you have 10 processes in BIM. But in the design stage, not all the processes are meaningful at the right time. So in design stage will be different type of BIM processes that are meaningful. In construction stage, let's say in tendering stage, also have a different kind of BIM process that is meaningful. But if you were to push all the same process into a current practice, going through the same flow, it will be an overload of processes. Therefore, it would not create a meaningful design in the construction industry. So, like I say, in the field of construction, there are different expertise and different experts in the field. Let's say the design inceptor and the documenter both have different point of views. And then now we have the project manager with a different kind of views, a different kind of balancing between the time, cost, and money. So when BIM push forward a new workflow that is untested, there will be arguments and rejection towards the time. Why? Of course, there's the common reasons that everyone has heard before. One is the lack of expertise in BIM, which at this time, the BIM process is picking up. Two, Is there a need for change? If we make this change, what is the disadvantage that we are going to face, and what are the advantages that we can see in the future? Of course, you guys have heard many presentations about how BIM can help a process. But at the same time, how much of time and resource would you put into finding a process which includes the BIM workflows that are wrong? Then thirdly, the project requirement, whether it requires BIM or not. For example, my experience in Cambodia, if the client pushes BIM and wishes to see a virtual construction, and it is in project requirement, it's a very effective way to push BIM. So how can you find such a project requirement? Normally, the stakeholders that encouraging to push BIM is on the design build side. Normally on the contractors, where they see the value of BIM, where they see the value of BIM as a very high turnout. However, it's not just the contractors that should be pushing BIM, but every industry experts, whether their contribution is small or big, everybody plays a part in contribution of BIM. So after you go through this coordination, this collaboration with different experts, you can push through to create a refined BIM workflows for your company. So as BIM plays in my view of BIM, we can be information regulator in the BIM implementation. Why do I say so? Firstly, everyone can see that this is an apple tree. It's a very common thing that, let's say I'm seeing the same apple tree, you're seeing the same apple tree, but however, everyone is having a different thought of how apple tree should be. As BIM plays a role as information regulator, I see that a common platform, a common language, or common sharing of data will be beneficial to the project. As a common environment will provide a single platform where everyone can share their opinion on the same object. So I would like to share that in these 6 to 7 years of implementing BIM on the lower level, what can be done? Firstly, to the main topic of the presentation, how do we balance the involvement of BIM and the authoring on the authoring part? Firstly, there's 2 ways of approach and BIM implementation. Of course, I'm not talking about on the higher level, but on the working level, there's 2 approaches where BIM can drive a design approach. First is a BIM implementer can take an active approach. This of course takes in consideration that the BIM expertise of the implementer is at the same line, the same wavelength of the design authoring process. And the second way is through the passive approach where BIM plays a supporting role, improving the same process, cutting down time, increasing efficiency, and decreasing the workload that is tasked to the project team. So as you balance 2 approaches are of course necessary to implement BIM in a company. However, the active approach and the passive approach brings both advantages and disadvantages. As you can see on the right, where the optimal involvement of a project on the technical standpoint, as BIM involvement gets higher in a project, more and more common languages and more common form of information needs to be shared on a common ground. The reason is because we are optimizing a process where you're taking in multiple streams of data from every different sources, merging into one single approach to refine your whole BIM workflow for your company. For example, one of the workflows that I can share is about what's the relationship between the BIM implementer and information controller. The BIM implementer, of course, it doesn't have to be a BIM personnel. It doesn't necessarily have to be a project designer, or project engineer. It does have to be one person that thinks that BIM can improve the whole design process, the collaboration process, bring it into the project environment from a raw BIM process. Let's say you're incorporating a new element into a project environment. Firstly, a BIM implementer, which is the author of the element, goes through a process where they create an element, place it into a common folder or common library, share it into a project environment. Of course, this is a very straightforward goal that doesn't make any hiccups. However, when you are managing multiple data streams, the role of the BIM information controller comes into play, where they control the information, whether it's standardized towards the whole, because the BIM information controller not only implements on their own project, it goes through different stages of project at different phases. So a meaning information needs to be digested and processed into a common language where it can share through multiple stages. This is the role of a BIM specialist in information controlling. So when you go through this process, it cuts down a lot of redundant time and remaking of a single element towards the project, thus saving a lot of manpower and sort of time, cutting down time for faster deadline submissions. So next, when information controller is a two-way feedback, where just now when I say that you're taking on an active role and a passive role, both ways have to be balanced in the right way so that it doesn't really interfere with the ongoing processes. After you're done with the creation process, of course, there's a feedback loop line where it goes through a senior information controller or someone that's more familiar with a common data environment so that the project elements can be reused for the next project. So a single feedback loop, a loop back such as this, maybe it takes about 1 or 2 weeks down the line. People can actually understand that going through such process, producing this common environment cuts down the waiting time. At the same time, benefits the project author or the BIM implementer. So you can see that this collaboration process is not a one-way method, but it needs specialties from different fields of life. On the second example, we can see that unregulated communication between different level expertise will also cause a problem in a common workflow. This comes in control when the BIM implementer and the BIM information controller comes at the same degree of control. Firstly, you have an author from a different project, gets an element from some weird source entering the project, which is unregulated. The second author gets the information from the project, implement it into the same project, but it doesn't know what's going on. So when BIM take the backseat as a support team, our role is to guide the new authors or the second author what has been done by the first author. All this goes back down to how you control information flow when you have multiple data streams in this current industrial world. And then we have a person from another project, which actually brings in extra garbage into the current project because he doesn't know what's happening. All these different data streams, 1, 2, 3, now we have 3 kind of elements entering the same project, which has different parameters that we need to share. At the same time, when we want to achieve something, we end up with multiple redundant elements that doesn't prove any meaningful information. When information aren't meaningful, they are just raw data that's waiting to be digested. Now, when it comes to the fourth person, that actually extracting information out, whether it's through schedules or going through different information sharing method through IFC, he doesn't know what the heck is going on because there's too many redundant data that is not processed by a single source. So when the information are regulated in the common workflow, having a common ground, sharing responsibilities both on the implementer and the information regulator, which is the core BIM team, hopefully this process can actually cut down and be better the next project. So how does the third, when BIM plays a heavy role involvement through the backseat line of a project, when the control of the BIM team has higher level of degree of control, we are able to control the data, the common environment, and how do we input the data for the project team. However, this degree of involvement takes a higher level of passive involvement and a lower level of passive involvement from the BIM implementer, and a higher degree of knowledge from the author. When we actually achieve such balance control, the implementer will not reject BIM and see BIM as a supporting element to actually develop the project up to construction phase. And then it's solely transferring of data to the FM stage. Of course, all this depends on how good your information control is, which is the core BIM team of a company. I believe that every person that is equipped in BIM are able to understand that a common data environment is very important in the BIM implementation. So to sum up what I'm trying to say, that how you control your project will actually affect how much benefit towards the BIM implementation process on a working level. Firstly, you can have a greater involvement towards BIM from the project team, because as they see BIM as a process that actually helps them and actually not stop them creating multiple guideways or gateways, they'll actually take in BIM more easily. You cut down the rejection, and then they see the output immediately. Of course, you do not see the output or the benefits of BIM immediately, because down the line, let's say you implement BIM 3 months ago, you will not see the benefits of BIM. But 3 months later down the line, judging by the volume and scale and the sheer scale of a project, the project team are able to graduate towards the benefits of adopting BIM in their project. Secondly, now we're handling multiple sources of data. Benefit the BIM team, actually a good BIM team that actually provides a common data environment, will be able to source out the data that's meaningful. When meaningful data gets sorted out on a common background, it'll produce meaningful information, thus at the same time increasing the BIM expertise of an implementer. And thirdly and lastly, the acceptance of BIM will be processed rapidly because the processes are smarter than the traditional way of working, at the same time taking in different aspects of data, not just from inside the project. Data comes from everywhere, from the internet, even the person next to you input data to you. But however, the digestion to make the process faster and smarter will always depend on how good you balance out meaningful data and how good are you able to control the process that makes data into meaningful information. All right, I think that sums up my sharing.